Hey, it's Sela Social Studies.
Hey guys, welcome to the non-witty beginning Mr. Seala's social studies class. All right, so today we're going to cover the Great Compromise. If you remember correctly, we ended the Constitution saying that we needed a compromise because the Bill of Rights was a compromise, right? I wasn't going to ratify the Constitution until the Bill of Rights was added. We also had the Compromise of 1790 that moved the capital to Washington, D.C. in order to assume the state's debts for Alexander Hamilton. Well, here comes another compromise. Now we're talking about the Great Compromise. Now, what is the Great Compromise and what's it for? The Great Compromise is about the long R word, baby, representation. What is representation? Well, these states want to know how they get represented in the Congress, right? Virginia is like, we are the largest state. We have the largest population. We should be represented way more than somebody else. Why does Rhode Island, who's like this big, get to have the same amount of representation we do? So we have an argument. And of course, when we have an argument, two different views at the beginning of our nation, remember what I said, we're going to have a compromise. So the issue of representation is what brings out the Great Compromise. And there were two plans. The Virginia plan was called the Large State Plan. Virginia was the largest colony at the time, or the largest state at the time. So now we have the Virginia plan. And what is the Virginia plan? The Virginia plan says that we wanted representation based on population. Representation, population. That's what Virginia wanted. They were the biggest state. They had the biggest population. They think that's the way it should be. All right. So the Virginia plan, along with other larger states like North Carolina, Pennsylvania, New York, probably Georgia, they were pretty big at the time. They wanted it based on population. We're bigger. We got more people. We got more muscle. We should be the ones to say how this nation's run. But think about this. If you did a plan like the Virginia plan, now you're thinking like a northerner from itty bitty Massachusetts. If you had more people from the South, because you have Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, you got a lot of people living there. If they're able to make all the rules, what would that make of slavery? Keep that in your mind. Because then the next plan you have is what we call the New Jersey plan. Now, the representation idea behind New Jersey, because they're a smaller state, is they're like, hey, our New Jersey plan, or our small state plan, says that we should have equal representation in Congress. Doesn't it make sense? You're a state, I'm a state, we're all states, we all belong to the United States. Hey, we should be like the Articles of Confederation, and we should each have normal equal representation. It makes sense. Hey, one state, two state, we're all states. We have the same equal representation. That's the idea. So you have the Virginians, you have the New Jerseyans. They're arguing population, equal representation, population. So somebody's like, oh my gosh, I've had enough. And who is this? This is the Sherman plan or the Connecticut plan. So here's what they do. They're like, well, we have states that are arguing about population. States are arguing about equal representation. Why don't we kind of give both, right? So here's what the Great Compromise does, or the Connecticut Compromise. It creates a bicameral legislature. And what a bicameral legislature is, it's just basically two houses of government, right? Bicameral is two houses of government. So they're saying, hey, instead of having one house where you're arguing about population and equal representation, why don't we have two houses with each based on whatever one of you think? So here's what they come up with. They come up with the upper house, which is the Senate. And you can see on the picture right there, the Senate has 100 members today, and there are 2 members per state. So each state is represented equally in the Senate. We also have the House of Representatives. Now, you look at the House of Representatives, their total, they have 435. So you kind of divide that up and you're like, that makes no sense. 50 states, 435. Well, the House of Representatives, the lower house, is based on population. So when you have states like California, like New York, like have these huge populations, they are going to have more representation in the House of Representatives. Now, in order for something to pass, the Senate as well as the House of Representatives has to pass it. Okay, here in 2020, when we have this stimulus bailout plan, the $2.2 trillion, it has to pass the House, which is primarily Democrats, and it has to pass the Senate, which is primarily Republicans. So you have to have a bipartisan plan to get through, because if the Republicans don't like it, then they won't pass it in the Senate. If the Democrats don't like it, then they won't pass it in the House of Representatives. And if that doesn't happen, nothing will ever get finished in our government of the United States. So here's a quick picture, and it's a good picture about what the compromise does. Large state, Virginia plan, representation, population. Those are the guys who wanted it based on representation of population. The smaller plan, the New Jersey plan, they were the ones who were like, hey, we're small states, I'm a state, you're a state, we're all states, let's all have equal representation. And they get together and they create the Great Compromise, the Connecticut Compromise, and they create the bicameral legislature, which is the two-house legislature. The House of Representatives, the lower house, takes the big state plan and uses population, and the Senate, which is the upper house, takes the New Jersey plan, which is equal representation. So now the states are kind of equally represented in the legislature, which is what they wanted in the first place.